Hi, we're Josh
and Ariel Walmsley,
owners of Green Valley Tree LLC, based in North Windham.
We're proud to sponsor Connecticut East this week and to serve the communities of Windham and New London counties with our tree removal and plant healthcare services.
Visit our website at greenvalleytreeworks.com for a full list of our services or give us a call on 860-234-4041. We look forward to hearing from you.
What's the future for the Crystal Mall in Waterford as yet another anchor store closes there? We have a candid conversation with the First Selectman of Waterford about his concerns and challenges about the mall. Plus a look at other stories making the headlines from around the region. This is Connecticut East This Week. Hello, I'm Brian Scott Smith. The COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted so much in our lives, and when it comes to business and retail operators, they too have been challenged as to how to keep their doors open and business flowing. But even before the pandemic hit, shopping malls across America have been struggling to get us through their doors. One such shopping mall is the Crystal Mall in the town of Waterford, which has seen retail outlet after retail outlet close their doors and now a second anchor store closing, leaving even less choice for shoppers. So what's its future looking like? I caught up with Rob Brule, the First Selectman of the town of Waterford, for a candid conversation about the Crystal Mall. First Selectman Brule, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's good to be here, Brian.
We're talking today about the Crystal Mall, which is the large shopping centre in Waterford. It's seen better days and looks like possibly its future is sort of uncertain at the moment.
Yeah, I think, Brian, with the recent media outlets following this and now the national media following Simon in particular, it's out there. It's been out there for a while, as you know. For me, it's kind of personal because I was a kid when it opened. And so to me to see this day, come, it's, kind of shocking in a way that it's actually here. But the good thing is for the town of Waterford, we're a vibrant, robust community that's etched in the retail fabric of southeastern Connecticut. So many conversations have been had about the trends, and now through the pandemic, even more so. This is not a surprise. This is something that, unfortunately, we saw coming, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that that property and the tenants and the employees have opportunities and options, hopefully, moving forward.
If you go to the mall at the moment, and I think this sort of just typifies the point. I've not visited the mall, and I live in Waterford. I've not visited the mall for, 2 or 3 weeks, and that's not just to do with weather or the pandemic. It's basically to do that when I last went there, there's probably only about 50% occupancy. So a lot of shopping that was there isn't there any longer. I think that's probably, true for a lot of people, isn't it? That there just isn't the variety there anymore.
No, it's true. Unfortunately, there are a lot of companies and small businesses that are trying to make it a go and do have a following. When you're based on the masses, like a mall is, and the amount of square footage that building holds, it can look pretty empty pretty quick. And I'm trying to get over there as much as I can through the pandemic. I've been monitoring it. I've been watching it as well. Try to reach out to Nate, general manager over there, as much as possible through the town to see if there's anything that we can do for those businesses that are still there, because it's a dual role for me. I have to do everything I can to support businesses that are in Waterford that are up and running. And this is a tough one because, everyone sees the writing on the wall, including myself. So you're always looking, I'm on that thin line there of where I'm also looking at the future and how to position the town moving forward. So it is difficult. I've been there. I try to go there regularly just to take a look around.
And I suppose really it's a sign of the times as well, isn't it? I mean, it doesn't matter what country you live in. I mean, I originally come from the United Kingdom. We've got shopping malls over there. Really, we've changed the way that we shop over the last, 10 or so years, because we do maybe a lot more internet shopping. And of course, there are large online retailers. And of course, that's hurt the shopping malls, which probably had their heydays in the 80s and 90s. And of course, some of those big anchor stores. I mean, we saw Sears sadly close closed down, a large anchor store at the Crystal Mall. And I think that was really the beginning of it. And now, of course, sadly, we're seeing Macy's close its doors, certainly here at the Crystal Mall, obviously not as a company, but sadly at the Crystal Mall. And these have big effects because anchor stores are there for a reason.
Correct. Yes, they are. They're the cement, of a mall. They're the base for which all of the businesses operate. You remember the days, Brian, when a smaller store would want to be connected to Filene's or next to Macy's or next to Sears, because it was all, it was well dialed in on where you wanted to be within the mall, because those are the entrances that most people would enter. And it would hit a demographic. It was just such a different way of doing business and targeting an audience. And now, when you have this shift to billions of dollars of online shopping, it completely changed the way we buy things, you and I included. So it's been a shift. It's certainly, when I look at the businesses that are still operating there, I want to do so much for them and do more if I can. And really, there's not a lot when the tide is going up against you in terms of retail and how a delivery system is set up. Because you do have retail doing pretty well up in Clinton Crossing, another Simon property that's doing, fairly well on the weekends. So that type of shopping could be the answer to future types of use for the Crystal Mall property.
The other point to make as well, Rob, is that, of course, these malls cost a lot of money as well, and upkeep and whatever. And obviously the Simon Group, who owns a majority of the Crystal Mall, I believe the Sears part is actually not owned by them, but you'll correct me in a second on that, is, of course, as I say, it's not just the upkeep of these. It's, they're large spaces, and it's finding, I suppose, retailers that can potentially fill those spaces, when a store or an anchor store disappears.
That's exactly it. And I think there's only so many large businesses. This is why you're seeing this shift to recreation, a shift to medical, a shift to residential. There's a reason for that. And I think you're seeing there's less inventories. Retail stores just hold less inventory now. They're going to this online market. This is why, the Amazons of the world are setting up all over the country, distribution centers. It's because, of inventory and who's holding it. And these independent stores that were really doing well in the 80s and 90s, really it started kind of dropping off in the early 2000s. And now, it wasn't the pandemic that did it, but I think the pandemic really, quickened, the impact of people leaving and people saying, you know what, I need to go in a different direction here if I'm a company owner. And I think that's where we saw it move pretty quickly. But the good thing is we have been prepared as a community. And I did spend most of my early time here last November when I got elected. I spent most of my time looking at options and looking at ways to coordinate an advisory panel to help me get through this, because it's a regional hub. It's not just a Waterford hub. This is a regional hub. Right up the street, the Waterford Commons is literally the same amount of tax value. The net assessed value is probably the same right up there at Crossroads or up at Commons Plaza. So there are retails, setup that works right now, and it's effective. But with the Crystal Mall, it's a large space that makes it very tough to fill.
One of the things I want to put to you, Rob, is, and you mentioned it, you've set up an advisory committee. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But sure. One thing I will say is Starbucks went into the Crystal Mall a little while ago. There is admittedly a smaller Starbucks in Target in Waterford as well. And that seems to be sort of something that they are doing. But when the Starbucks opened at the Crystal Mall, that really did seem to energize people, because people popped down there to get their coffee. And it was a case of, oh, well, while I'm here, I'll take a little walk around the Crystal Mall. Do you think if they could try and get some of these brands in, especially so like food or so like, as I say, coffee type brands to come in, that maybe that could entice people in? Because one of the things I think that is missing from malls is, other than the eatery section where you obviously sit down to eat, is something like a supermarket. I mean, and there are actually still some very big names around that are still looking to expand. Trader Joe's is one of them, Whole Foods is another. I mean, do you see that as a possibility?
To be honest with you, Brian, I see, after talking to the advisory, I call them I didn't title that. I chose to call them an advisory panel because they're influencers in the business world in Connecticut. So I call them my advisory panel because they gave me some really good feedback and showed, kind of said, hey, we're all in this together. But yeah, I think there's possibilities. There's talks out there with what types of retail would work, talks about medical, there's talks of grocery stores. I think Trader Joe's has said, time and time again, it's a demographic that they look for. They have to hit a number for traffic. I think if we continue to look outside the box, we might provide an opportunity where they will want to look at Waterford and the Crystal Mall area, to open. But that's on us to make sure that we can provide, a good home, a good area for business. So I think all this kind of leads itself to one another. I think no one wants to be the first person into a cold pool. And I think we're right now trying to make sure that we can kind of have an open dialogue with people to say, hey, this is what we can do. This is the area, the ideas that we have. I already have planning and zoning and the planning director working on ways to open up opportunities for people. So when they do want to come in, we've already worked on some zoning regulations that might offer, a Stu Leonard, Trader Joe's, a Whole Foods to come in there. We've already done the work to approve such a business like that coming in. But I have to be careful because whenever I say a name that people, they're the rumors. He said it. He told Brian, Scott Smith, that we're going to have a Stu Leonard's or an Amazon. Like, it's not it at all. I'm trying to just come up with ideas, send it to the advisory panel, talk to my planning director to see how we can take these ideas and stabilize people's thoughts on what can be done in that Crystal Mall area.
You said earlier about Trader Joe's had mentioned about whether or not there's the correct amount of footfall. I mean, it's an interesting comment you make there because, of course, just down the road is a brand new Costco, which is a multi-million-dollar investment by them in a much smaller town than Waterford. Yet, you sometimes struggle to get in that Costco because it's so popular. It's rather surprising that, sort of a national chain would make potentially that sort of comment when quite clearly there is the appetite and there is, in fact, the people in the area with the money.
Correct. You make a good point. There's no doubt that we are, we're looking. There's a need for, that type of supermarket. I can just let you know that we're, in terms of Waterford, we're constantly looking to find ways of not only open storefronts, which is a whole nother discussion probably for another day, but attracting a business to come in like that. We want to make sure that they can come in and be successful for the long haul. We want it to be a long-term relationship for any business coming in. So we need to do some things a little bit differently, I believe, because if we do that, I think people will be calling us and people will be asking us, hey, we can't wait to get there. How do we get there? How do we move into that space? So we just got to continue to do what we're doing, making it easier for, businesses to come into town, making it a little bit, our planning and zoning process a little bit more business friendly if we can. And I think that's just all the planning director is making a lot of huge steps in that direction.
Another thing that's been sort of like mentioned, I believe, by you in the past as well, is about, senior housing, in that, potentially parts of the mall could be rezoned so that it's actually sort of accommodation rather than just retail. I mean, that sounds like a great idea because we're always hearing about people wanting to now stay closer to home. And this is pre-pandemic. People just didn't want the commute to work as much and they wanting to sort of live closer to home. And also, of course, the fact that, we are living longer. So having something like senior living accommodation in a fabulous facility like the Crystal Mall seems a no-brainer.
It does for you and I guess. But when you start talking about, Brian, the cost that it would definitely entail, malls do not have natural light. That's something that I've learned from developers. The good thing about the Crystal Mall is obviously it does have a large sunroof that does let a lot of natural light in, which is uncommon and unusual and a very positive factor. But yeah, you start thinking about residential use. You talk about senior housing, we talk about affordable housing, you talk about recreational, retail, restaurants, banks. You can start really thinking about how that could be a village of sorts. When you start talking about indoor, outdoor activities, you already have the walking indoors. You have enough room for indoor tennis, indoor pool, outdoor pool, movie theaters. Like you start thinking about what the possibilities are and what the trends are now of malls across the country, the microtels that are going in, some right in New Haven, I believe up in Providence. So there's things that people are being very creative on these. The great thing about Crystal Mall is the location. Probably the number one positive. There is no better location in the area. Right on 95. You can go 95, you can go 95 south, 95 north. You can go 395 north. It is located in such an amazing area. And I believe being as close to the ferry, being close to the train, being close in a hop, skip, and a jump, Uber ride back home from a train station. And New London and Mike, Mayor Passero, who's doing a great job of revitalizing that city, it becomes a nice synergistic relationship with us. If we can provide retail and he's providing restaurants down in the city, it becomes a win-win for both communities. So there is some energy behind this type of approach. And living is certainly one of those areas that I believe that probably the most attention we've gotten from towns and the developers has been that residential piece. That's been developers are excited about the opportunities if the opportunities become available.
The other thing to bear in mind, and again, I'm sure this has been discussed and thought about, is there is a lot of business clearly around the area, not just in Waterford, but like you said, New London and the surrounding towns. Some of it, pretty big business, of course, like Electric Boat and Pfizer. And of course, You've got Dominion Energy in Waterford. A conference centre. I mean, I know we do have the casinos, which clearly are a big draw for conferences. And I know at the moment, of course, with the pandemic, we're just not seeing that because it's not possible. But I mean, it would seem to suit itself ideally for a conference centre because, again, what you've said, it's a hub, it's got easy access, it's got all of that parking.
You're absolutely right. I think there are so many possibilities that I'm very optimistic. I always think there's opportunities behind every setback. And I think I'm a glass half full person. I think people who know me well, know that about me. I'm always looking to look outside the box. I'm always looking to, hey, it could have, positive energy brings a lot of positive results, but I'm not naive either. I realize that this is going to take many organizations to be at the table. It's going to take many people to be on the same page. Everyone's going to have ideas on what the best way to go about this is. And I think that's why getting consensus from our town, getting consensus from our planning department and planning director, making sure that I bring in the right people who have the experience in developments in terms of retail and residential, and looking at all the numbers. What does it look like 10 years from now, 20 years from now for Waterford? What we have shown is that our population has stayed around 19,300 for years. It's been very stable. Our school enrollment has been the same. Our largest growth in population has been over 55, and that's probably for our area. That's the trend naturally throughout southeastern Connecticut, but Waterford's no different. And you're right. I believe there is a market for senior housing. I believe there's a market for over 55 active community in Connecticut, in Waterford. But that's just me thinking outside the box. It's not me sitting there with a checkbook and saying we can make this happen and we can continue to have J.C. Penney open. We can continue to keep Bed Bath & Beyond and the Christmas tree store open. We can work with the banks. We can work with these owners to show them that we can be creative here. So I'm not willing to put up a white flag. I got a yellow flag up right now just because I'm not the one making the decisions right now. And sometimes as a leader of the town, that's sometimes the most frustrating thing, is to be in that position of not being helpless, but it's not my decision to make. It's out of my hands. But while it's out of my hands, I'm trying to be as proactive as I possibly can, Brian, to make sure that we're positioned to have these conversations. And I think when we start talking about the steps that we're taking as a community, I think you'll find that we're taking a methodical, proactive approach.
And just a quick final point to you, Rob. When the situation does sort of like present itself, is it a case of the town of Waterford will be, will have the final say when it comes to like rezoning? We don't have to wait for like state approval. Is this something that could be done locally rather than have to have the state intervene?
We're always going to have the state involved, just because 85 is a state road. That will always be a relationship. And we have a very good relationship with the state of Connecticut, DECD, Department of Transportation as well. So we're used to working with them. Most of our town is surrounded or goes through state roads. So we have a very good relationship with them. But I do think local, obviously local zoning, planning and zoning ordinances and regulations will be part of any decision that moves forward, which is why this proactive approach in meeting with Nancy Kauser, the executive director at Sector, is when we talked about that advisory panel. She's really one of the major players helping us right now. Tony Sheridan, former first selectman here at Town of Waterford. I pick his brain all the time. He's the executive director for the Chamber of Commerce for Eastern Connecticut. Jim Butler, the executive director for the Southeastern Connecticut's Council of Governments. Dave Lehman, the commissioner of DECD. Sadie from Advanced Connecticut's was on this committee. Senator Formica, Representative McCarty, my staff. The people that are involved in these types of discussions have now really got to the point where Sector and the town of Waterford are now coming to an agreement that I'm recommending a feasibility study be done on the property. We are reaching out to, I think Seritage already got back to us about participating in this, which was great news from them. They're the landlord of the Sears property. So we're making headway with Sears, and we're making progress with others to come to the table to do a study on the property and what we could conceivably be done. I think it's critically important that we do all this now and have it laid out, and then create our zoning ordinances, put that in place. So we're not wasting anyone's time later. If anything, if more stores close, or if we have to make decisions a little bit quicker on direction. So Nancy, we're going to do a matching grant. She's already agreed to write this up and work with EDA and get a 50% match. And I'm going to be going to the Board of Finance once I get a cost, and I will be asking for funding for this study. It's critically important I do this. And I know I'll get support from the Board of Finance and the RTM to do this. And in the meantime, we're doing a workshop kind of study with other malls, like a smaller study. What are other malls doing in the country? And listing it out so people can see pictures, and people can see the return on investment, which is critically important. This study that Nancy and Sector is going to help us with, going to basically tell the town of Waterford and developers what's the return on investment going to be for certain uses of the property. So I'm looking forward to that. It's a proactive step. It's going in the right direction to make sure that we're acting, not reacting. And I know, there's a lot of people in town who are concerned about this, and rightfully so. My concerns are just as much for the employees who work there as it is for the businesses who are struggling. I'm constantly looking at the tax rate in Waterford, and the more I do now, and the more I am proactive about this property and others in town, including Seaside, the better off we'll be as a tax base. And I think there's just some other things that are going on that are offsetting the cost and the loss of taxes. This year they are paying their taxes. So for my residents out there, they're paying their taxes this year. Next year becomes a whole nother year. But right now we've got positive economic growth in the Hartford Health building that's just opening up. Possibly the solar farm that's opening up on Oil Mill right down the road is another very large taxpayer. So there's options out here that we're following up on, and we've been successful at. And I think I just want to make sure the residents in town This is not a funeral. This is an opportunity, and we're going to be okay. And I think the area is behind us. Our neighboring towns are behind us. They want to see success in that, in that area. I'm looking forward to the next steps, to be honest with you, because we're talking openly and honestly with people and groups. And I think we're coming out this with a business approach, and all the while keeping the taxpayer in mind.
Rob Brule, First Selectman of the town of Waterford. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and thank you ever so much for a very candid and great update on the situation with regards to the Crystal Mall, but also all of the work that you're doing down at the town of Waterford. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Absolutely, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Since recording the interview, the Waterford Board of Selectmen have approved funding for the feasibility study for the Crystal Mall, and the Board of Finance will vote soon on that funding. Also, Connecticut East this week did reach out to the Simon Group, who own the Crystal Mall, to get their side of the story and what their hopes are for the shopping centre going forward. However, the Simon Group, through their PR firm, declined to give an interview. It should also be noted that the Simon Group is due to hand the keys to the Crystal Mall back to lenders in what is being termed as a friendly foreclosure, as they do not expect to be able to refinance an $84.4 million mortgage loan on the property, leaving the future of the mall unclear.
Green Valley Tree LLC is proud to sponsor Connecticut East this week. Contact Green Valley Tree LLC for all your tree removal and plant health care needs and more. Find us at greenvalleytreeworks.com or call 860-234-4041.
Time now for a look at some of the other stories making the headlines in the region recently, sponsored by
the Connecticut Council on Problem Gambling is a non-profit organization which, through advocacy, prevention, and education, is here to support individuals and families who are impacted by problem gambling. Our helpline, 1-888-789-7777, is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We also have live chat and tech support through our website, www.ccpg.org.
Energy companies Eversource and Ørsted have reached a multi-million-dollar, multi-year host city agreement with the City of New London over the use of state pier for future offshore wind projects. Mayor Mike Passero of New London says despite the Connecticut Port Authority's involvement in the project and their continued dysfunction, he doesn't believe the deal was struck to take the media spotlight off of them.
We were at a crucial point in that process. So if anything was driving the timetable, it was the process, the permitting process. Nobody wanted to jeopardize the project. In order for New London to move forward, quite frankly, there had to be a fair share of revenue for the city, and that was the issue.
Recently, the City of New London was given intervenor status, which would have given them a say over permits for the project. The host agreement will benefit the City of New London with yearly payments of around $1 million for the next 7 years once offshore wind projects begin. In the Connecticut Examiner this week, Eversource has proposed 3 options for rate increases to its residential electric customers next summer: a $12 a month increase to the average customer, smaller increases over several years, or borrowing about $200 million to keep increases lower. In the day this week, facing pressure from increasingly impatient parents, the Stonington Board of Education instructed superintendents of schools Van Riley to prepare a plan to return all students to 4 days a week of in-person instruction. He is scheduled to present that plan to the board on March 11th. In the Norwich Bulletin this week, a key member of Governor Lamont's administration said they're at the precipice of finally reaching a comprehensive gambling expansion agreement with Connecticut's tribal nations, but acknowledges they're closer to sealing the deal with just one of the 2 federally recognized tribes. And in the Chronicle this week, the town of Scotland may receive grant funds from the state to help balance its budget. If approved, as currently written, $400,000 would be appropriated. And in next week's Connecticut East This Week, we're talking marijuana. The governor wants to see recreational use of the drug legalized in the state, and a vote on several bills is coming up in this legislative session. Plus, we talk to a medical marijuana grower in the state to see what effect legalization would have on their business. That's all from us for this edition. Do send us your questions and story ideas to the show via our website at connecticut-east.com or Facebook or Twitter at Connecticut East, where you can also listen to the show again on demand. And please like, follow and share on your social media platforms too. I'm Brian Scott Smith. Thank you for listening.